Hey, hello, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Well, today I'm going to talk about Eurovision, and it's going to be a walk down memory lane, as I usually do on this channel, because I won't talk too much about this year's Eurovision, because it's been so steeped in controversy. So I won't really go into that. What I will do at the end of this video is I will mention a couple of my favorite tracks from this year's Eurovision. When you watch this, it's after the fact, perhaps, who knows, because I'm going to release this on the day of the final in Malmö, Sweden. So yeah, I'll leave out the controversy. I'm just going to focus on the songs from this year, but that will be at the end of this video, as I said. Now I will go down memory lane, because Eurovision and the Swedish Melodifestivalen has always been a big thing in my family growing up back in Sweden. So let's kick things off now with this Eurovision special. Eurovision. A perfect introduction to this special, I think, that is from 1980. The group is Telex, and the song is, of course, Eurovision. And I was blown away when I prepared for this episode, reading that Telex was in Eurovision. Perhaps I should have known this, but I didn't, and it was a really pleasant surprise. Because to me, Telex was known way later in the 1980s as a synth-pop band that had great tracks like Moscow Disco. But I had no clue that they were in Eurovision at some point. Perhaps because I don't remember this one at all, it doesn't ring a bell when listening back to it. So perhaps it was just too uninteresting to me back then, or it's just too quirky or out there for my young mind. Who knows? But anyhow, growing up in Sweden, at least in my family, I know so many other families, Melodifestivalen, as we called it in Sweden, which was the show where we selected either an artist or a band to represent Sweden for that specific year in the Eurovision. That was a highlight of the year, and of course the Eurovision itself as well. We've always been a big Eurovision nation, Sweden. Well, not always, but from what I can remember. So that's why I'm starting with my earliest memories. I do have some memories from songs from the 70s as well, late 70s. But I thought, just for the sake of it, we'll start in 1980, because that's where I have very fond memories from. And I used to love Melodifestivalen, and still do. We'll come to that a bit later, because I had a bit of a hiatus in most of the 90s when it comes to Melodifestivalen and Eurovision. Yeah, back then I loved it. I loved seeing different artists and bands from different corners of Europe, and different genres as well, and that's what I love with both the Melodifestivalen and Eurovision even today. Just to get exposed to the greats, the bads, and the quirky ones, and all of that. But I will stop babbling about that. Let's go down memory lane, and like I said, I'll start in 1980 and with the Swedish Melodifestivalen. One of my fond memories from that one. That was Janne Lukas med växeln Hallå, hallå. And that is roughly translated to switchboard, hello, hello. Very roughly translated. Very catchy song, and I just have to make a disclaimer here as well. I'm not going to say, does it still hold up today, like I usually do? Because to me, most of these songs that we're gonna focus on today still holds up to me, but that's nostalgia speaking, right? So if it came out today, I probably won't think it was that great of a song, but it brings a smile to my face, and like I said, that's nostalgia speaking. That's all those memories around this. So yeah, let's move on. The same year we had another very popular song from this artist. This is Thomas Ledin. And the song is called Just Nu, or Just Now. if we translate it. He was very popular at this point. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he already released a couple of solo albums at this point, and he also played with ABBA at some point. So he was a very established musician in Sweden at this point. And like I said, he got really popular with this song. He won the Melodifestivalen this year, 1980, so he was to represent Sweden in the Eurovision, where he ended up in the 10th place. And if you know anything about Eurovision and the Swedes, that is not good enough. That is anything less than 5th place in the Eurovision for us Swedes, that is a failure, basically, yeah. Well, I don't know how harsh we really were back in 1980, because back then I was just enjoying the songs. I wasn't really into what the press were writing about this or what other people were saying. Back then, as kids, we just enjoyed the music, and that's what you should do. Yeah, so that was that one. I've never been a big fan of Thomas Ledin, but he is considered an icon in Sweden. He had so many hits in Sweden, especially in the 1980s. He's huge in Sweden. Let's just say that. But who won the Eurovision of 1980?
What's another year? Colin Selly.
Of course. What's Another Year, with the beautiful voice of Johnny Logan. I can't say that I have any specific memories of this one. I do recognize it listening back to it, but it might be a false memory because we've been hearing it so much over the years, if you're an avid Eurovision fan, that is. Yeah, he had a string of hits during the 1980s, so let's just say we have reason to come back to Johnny Logan a bit later. Yeah, I won't dwell too long on each year here, but I do have one more song from Melodifestivalen 1980 that I want to highlight. This is Kenta. Yeah, Kenta and the song Utan att fråga, without asking, roughly translated. He was quite a character, this Kenta. He first appeared in a documentary, I think that came out in 1969 by a Swedish documentary filmmaker called Stefan Jarl. And he lived a really rough life, Kenta did. And he was a bit of a surprise seeing him singing this on Melodifestivalen in 1980. So it goes to show that we did have a bit of the odd ones here and there as well, because when I look back or think back on Melodifestivalen, and especially throughout the 80s, most of the things sounded the same, but that's not really true looking back at this one. I don't have any vivid memories of this one. This is something that I picked up way later in time. And I do appreciate it for what it is. It's something different. And I think he does a great job. And he did go on to record other songs as well. He became like a cult icon in Sweden and still is. And all credit to him for turning up in the Swedish Melodifestivalen, especially in 1980. That was a daring move, I would say. Good one, Kenta. Let's move on to 1981. That was Björn Skifs, another very established artist in the Swedish music industry. He's one of those icons as well. He's done everything from music to films, theater, musicals, all of that. And the song here was called Fångad i en dröm, Captured in Dream. And that was a winning entry for that year's Melodifestivalen, and he ended up in the 10th place in the Eurovision. Yeah, so another disappointment there from a Swedish entry. But yeah, great song, I think, and Björn Skifs, like I said, a legend. And by the way, he was the voice of Blue Swede and that song that we all know. Yeah, that one, that Blue Swede. That is Björn Skifs voicing that great track. So that year's Eurovision was won by the UK, and who can forget this one? Making Your Mind Up. Legendary performance there from Bucks Fizz, and they are forever part of the Eurovision legends, as it is. So Bucks Fizz, I can't remember them being on the charts in Sweden after this one. I know that they were more popular here in the UK, and they did release quite a lot of singles after this one. So I'm sure they had a really good career after this one. But I think it started and stopped with Bucks Fizz and Making Your Mind Up when we talk about Sweden, at least. Let's move on to 1982, and I have a couple of more entries to talk about in this one, both from the Swedish Melodifestivalen and certainly Eurovision as well. But let's kick things off with this gem. I love this song back in the day. This is Chattanooga, and the song is called Hallå hela pressen. And if we're going to translate that one, it's going to be roughly, really roughly, Hello the whole press. Yeah, I know it's weird. But what they're singing about, they met a guy at a party last night, and now they need to find him. So they call out to TV, newspapers, radio, the whole press corps, basically. Yeah, so that's what it is. And like I said, yeah, I love this tune. It became a big hit for them as well. They only ended up in second place, actually, in Melodifestivalen, but it became a big hit in Sweden. And I never got this one on a single. I got it on a tape back then, and I played it over and over and over and over again. I was obsessed with this song. Fast forward to a couple of months ago when I went into my favorite record shop, and what did I find? Yeah, this one. This is the single. This is Chattanooga, and as you can see, it's not Hallå hela pressen. It's actually got an English title, Attention Everybody. Yeah, that was the English translation of this one, and what was most mind-blowing to me, that I didn't knew that there was an English version of this one. So because it was a big hit in Sweden and they came in the second place in the Melodifestivalen, and someone from the record company probably thought, yeah, let's see how it goes if we record this in English and try to distribute it outside Sweden's borders. And it turned up here in the UK as well. And I don't know, I probably didn't go very well for them, but it's a bit of a curiosity, really. Yeah, I was so pleased when I found this one. Yeah, Chattanooga and Hallå hela pressen, or Attention Everybody. But enough about Chattanooga. We have to move on because we're going to see who was representing Sweden in 1982. Very colorful performance there from Chips, and the track is called Dag efter dag, or Day After Day, translated. Yeah, this one became a big hit, not only in Sweden. I think most of the Scandinavian countries, this one was a big one. And across age groups, really, young and old were loving this. I remember me and my friends had them on mixtapes, and it was just getting played everywhere. And it became one of the summer hits for that year, actually. And they were selected to represent Sweden that year, 1982. And how did they fare in the Eurovision? Well, 8th place. So not going very well for the Swedish entries so far in the early 1980s, but they did have a huge hit in Sweden, at least with this one. But there was other interesting things popping up in the Eurovision of 1982, and the coolest thing to me back then was this one from Denmark. This was Brix. It's spelled Brixx. Very cool, very futuristic, and I loved this one. The title is Video. And it was not only futuristic, I loved that pulsing synth intro. Loved the chorus. The clothes were good. This was so cool to me back then. I mean, it just oozed a future around this song to me. I mean, they sang about video, right? And speaking of videos, we were one of the few households back then that had a video recorder, at least in our neighborhood. And we used to tape off all kinds of programs. And of course, one of them were Eurovision Song Contest. And with this one not being played much on Swedish radio, I just took the matters in my own hands. I fast forward to the bit where Brick started playing. I pressed play on that one, press record on my tape cassette that was pressed up against the telly's loudspeakers, and that's how I got Bricks and video on a tape. So I can listen to it over and over again. And it's quite funny to listen back to this one today. It brings such a big smile to my face. He sings about being addicted to video, basically. He got everything he needs on video. Back home, he's got tapes of Björn Borg playing in Wimbledon, all kinds of movies and all that. All he needs is just to watch his video. He's addicted to video. A very funny lyric now. I didn't know if I reflected on that one back then. Probably not. All I needed to hear was that he was singing about video, which to me was the future. So yeah, that's it. And the Bricks, unfortunately, they ended up in the 17th spot on the Eurovision for this year. If it was up to me back then, they would have won the whole thing and every future competition as well. Yeah. That was Bricks and video. Great memories. But what won that year was a girl from Germany called Nicole, and she sang this one. Ein bisschen Frieden with Nicole, and she did also do an English version of this one, of course. And this one was big. If I said one of the previous tracks were really big, this one was big all across Europe. Song about peace and harmony, usually works in Eurovision. Yeah, so enough about 1982 now. Let's move on to 1983 and we'll kick things off with this one. I think if you ask any Swede, this is the song where they remember from Melodifestivalen and Eurovision of 1983. This is of course Carola, or as she was called back then, Carola Häggkvist, and the song Främling, Stranger. And this introduced Carola to Europe, so to speak, and she became a really big star in Sweden, of course, with this one. It was hugely popular. But she only ended up in 3rd place with this one in Eurovision, but it is a vast improvement from the other entries we had from previous years, right? So we are making progress here with Carola and Främling. Really don't have any more to say about 1983. I try to slim things down here so it don't get too lengthy. I tend to do things like that. So let's move on to 1984. Exactly 40 years ago, Herreys stood on that Eurovision stage and they won the whole thing. So now we're on the right track, right? Yeah, it's amazing. This one, like so many other songs that were sent to Eurovision during the 1980s, became big hit. And this one, of course, across Europe also garnered them a lot of attention. Yeah, it's of course called Diggiloo Diggiley, and I don't need to translate that. I think it's universal. It's just a happy feeling, and they're singing about wearing golden shoes and everything's great, basically. Great track there. Unfortunately, they didn't have much of success after this one. They did release more, both albums and singles after this one in Sweden, but outside Sweden they are only known for this song, I would say, except for some hardcore fans here and there around the world, I'm sure. But yeah, that was it for 1984, because I went through the list of the other entries from Melodifestivalen back then, but I couldn't find anything that I felt was really something that I vividly remember and had fond memories of. So I think Hoorays from the beginning was the one for me as well, the one that should have won it all, and it did. So without hesitation, we'll move on to 1985. That was Pernilla Wahlgren and Piccadilly Circus. And from what I remember, this one was more popular with us kids and teenagers back then. The older generation didn't really care for this one, but we thought it was edgy, it was cool. She was singing about London and Piccadilly Circus specifically, because apparently that's where it was happening. That's where you got all the cool music from. If you ever went to London, all you need to do is go to Piccadilly Circus. That's a place to be, as Pernilla sings. Yeah, so it only ended up in the 4th place. What actually took home the crown that year in the Swedish Melodifestivalen was this one. This is Kikki Danielsson, and the song is called Bra Vibrationer, or Good Vibrations. And this one didn't hit home as well as other Eurovision entries in previous years, with us kids at least. This was more for the older generation, I would think. But not only, there was of course exceptions to that. But I think to us it was a disappointment not seeing Pernilla actually winning the whole thing with our favorite song, Piccadilly Circus. She was sent to Eurovision that year, but only ended up in 3rd place. Oh, the shame. And we could see ourselves being outrun by Norway, who took home the victory that year with Bobby Socks. And this one has become one of the big classics among Eurovision fans, of course. La det svinge, or Let It Swing, as it was called. And there's a bit of trivia in this one, because one of the artists, one part of Bobby Socks is Elisabeth Andreasen, I think she's called. And she was actually one part of Ships that I mentioned before. And the other part of Ships was Kikki Danielsson, that was now competing against Elisabeth Andreasen in this particular year. Yeah, so a bit of trivia there for you. Norway took home the victory, and like I said, the rest is history. It became one of the big nostalgia favorites among Eurovision fans after that one. We now move on to 1986, and when I think of 1986, I always think of that's probably where 1980s peaked. Because if you watch a movie today or a TV series that takes place somewhere in 1980s, they always dress up the characters in really colorful clothing, big hairs and all of that. And that, of course, that did happen earlier in the 80s as well. But I think 1986, at least in my opinion, this is where it peaked. It was all over the place. It was not only the artists that dressed this way, it was also friends in school. You could see people on the streets dressing in these really colorful outfits, big hairs and all of that. So that's why I'm saying I think 1986 is where it's all peaked. And why do I mention this? Is because the next one that we're going to have a look at is from the Swedish Melodifestivalen in 1986. And this is certainly colorful and bright and all of that. That was Anna Bok, and the track is called ABC, and yeah, it's ABC. This track became a big hit in Sweden as well, but it only ended up in 4th place in the Swedish Melodifestivalen. I wasn't really a big fan of the track back then, still isn't really a big fan of it, but it's become one of those Melodifestivalen classics among Melodifestivalen fans in Sweden. So it's one of those staples that we look back on. But like I said, I wasn't really a big fan, but I do vividly remember this Melodifestivalen because this was the first, if I'm not mistaken, I should have checked this up before, but I think this was the first time that they played with no orchestra at all, and the entries had submitted music videos. So we only got to see music videos of these songs, no live performances. So it was quite unique because up until this point, you had to have an orchestra, someone conducting it, and that's why most of the Eurovision entries up to this point at least always had this orchestral sounding thing, even if they were probably composed with just synthesizers at this point. Yeah, so I think 1986 is the first one where the Swedish entries were allowed to just submit music videos, and that's what we were voting for, really, or the jury was voting for. Well, let's move on. The next track from the Swedish Melodifestivalen of 1986 that I want to highlight is the artist Git Persson. Yeah, Git Persson was performing with the song Du förför mig, or roughly translated, You Are Seducing Me. Yeah, very funny video there with a very popular journalist in the role of a vampire in that one. And I think that's why I remember it so vividly, especially this Melodifestivalen, because like I said, it was the first time we actually got to see music videos for these ones. And music videos, they were far and in between in Sweden at this point. So we were just loving seeing music videos on telly. So I think that's why I remember them so well. This one has also become more or less of a cult classics among Melodifestivalen fans in Sweden. But it didn't fare very well in Melodifestivalen. It ended up, I think, in last place or something like that. They didn't get many points, if any, really, in this one. I tried to check it up. It just says blank. So I assume it didn't get any votes at all. A bit of a different voting system back then. We couldn't phone in and vote. They had expert juries and all of that, if I didn't mention that before. Before we go to the winner of Melodifestivalen 1986, I want to mention one other standout track from that year. This is Lena Philipsson, and the track is called Kärleken är evig. Kärleken är evig, or translated, Love is forever. That is a great, great pop song. And it was a big hit in Sweden at the time. Ended up in the second place in the Melodifestivalen. We nearly sent that one as our representative that year. It was really, really close. And I have to say, at the time, I didn't really admit loving this song because in 1986, at this point, I was listening to much edgier music than this. I was very into synth pop, electronic music overall, and it wasn't really cool to say that you loved Lena Philipsson. But now, when I'm grown up, I can admit, yeah, I think this is a good pop song. And of course, back then, I could still admit enjoying pop tunes, but it was usually from Madonna and the likes. So yeah, so it was a bit shameful to say you love Lena Philipsson. But I actually bought this record back in the day, but it was kept very far back in my record collection, so no one could find it really when looking through it. And I still have it here. Here it is. This is the album from Lena Philipsson, also called Kärleken är evig, Love is forever. And I think there are some other tracks on this one that are good as well, but I think that is a standout track for me. That's why I bought this album, and I still think it holds up today. It's really good, and it's actually co-written with Lena Philipsson by Per Gessle of Roxette fame. So There you go. So, who won the Melodifestivalen in 1986 and got to represent Sweden in the Eurovision? Before we continue, I nearly missed one. I promised you that we will see the winner here soon for the Swedish Melodifestivalen 86. But there's one more track that stood out that year and became a really big hit. This is Style and Dover Calais. Yeah, this track, it ended up in 3rd place in Melodifestivalen, so just beneath Lena Philipsson that we just talked about. But I think, in honesty, this one was the biggest hit of them all, even if it just came in 3rd place. This was certainly one of the big hits in Sweden back in 1986. If you're going to do a summarize of what was on the charts back then when it came to Swedish music, this is the one. They used to be called Freestyle. They were a bigger band back then. They had a couple of hits in Sweden in the early 80s, but then some members left. They reformed and they called themselves Style. They entered the Swedish Melodifestivalen, and the rest is history, as we say. Yeah. Just wanted to mention that one because it's important. And then on to the winner of the Swedish Melodifestival 1986.
Ja, det var inte särskilt spännande, för redan från början så drog ju Lasse Holm och Monica Tunnell, och är det här du kallar kärlek? Alltså melodi nummer 4 ifrån. Är det här du kallar kärlek?
Är det här du kallar kärlek? It's translated to, is this what you call love? Wasn't a big fan of this one when it came out, but it did take home the Swedish Melodifestivalen in Eurovision, and it ended up in 5th place. So yeah, we're going down again. Not good at all. But as a footnote, I just want to say Lasse Holm is a really famous musical, and I'll say musical artist in Sweden. He writes a lot of music for other artists and lyrics as well. He does the full package for them. But he did release a couple of solo singles, especially in 1986. This one with Monica Tunnell, of course, which was a famous singer as well in Sweden. But if you want to delve into Lasse Holm, I would recommend you get hold of this album that he released that year in 1986. Self-titled, Lasse Holm, very colorful and interesting cover there. It does include this song, Är det här du kallar kärlek, but most importantly, a song that became a cult classic in Sweden, really. Cannelloni Macaroni. Yeah, you just have to go out and search for that one just to witness the madness of Lasse Holm. And the brilliance, of course. I think he's a brilliant songwriter. He had his foot in so many successes throughout the years, especially in 1980s in Sweden. But enough about him. Let's move on to the Eurovision of 1986. And the winner of that Eurovision was this young lady. This, of course, is Sandra Kim, and the song is called J'aime la vie. Beautiful pop song, and still holds up really well today. And I'm not just speaking from nostalgia point of view here. I really think it's a good pop tune that still holds up today. So that's all I have to say about that one. Of course, huge hit all across Europe after the win. But let's now move on to the next year. We are into 1987. And let's start with the Swedish Melodifestival, as usual. And this is Arja Saijonmaa, with a song called Högt över havet. Roughly translated to High Above the Sea. And this was another big favorite, perhaps among the older audience, I might suspect. But it is another one that has been deemed a Melodifestivalen classic over the years. Very popular among Melodifestivalen fans in Sweden. But we had other notable entries that year. We already talked about Lena Philipsson. This year she was back with a vengeance. This is Lena Philipsson and Dansa i neon. When translated, Dansa i neon becomes dancing in neon. It could be more 80s. No, not really. This is Lena Philipsson back with a vengeance, like I said. This is an even better entry than the one she had the previous year. Even I thought that one was outstanding. This one is even better. And my love for Lena Philipsson hasn't died by this point. So I bought the record this time around as well. This was the last one that I bought by Lena Philipsson, and mainly because of the song Dansa i Neon. The other ones, there are some of them that's pretty decent, but it was mainly for that one. I don't know why I didn't buy the single. Well, I know that actually, because when I bought this one, she actually signed it for me. It was like a signing session in one of those big department stores that we had in town. And she was there, and I don't think they had the single at that point. They were pushing us to buy the album instead, and then she signed it for us. I'm not a big autograph collector at all, but it was nice. She signed this one, and I still got it in my collection. Really, really good track. It became a huge hit as well in Sweden. But she didn't win this time around either. Sadly, she just ended up in 5th place. Can you believe it? No, me neither. Who did win then? Well, it was this one. Yes, Lotta Engberg and Boogaloo and Rock and Rolla or something like that. It's so silly. Back in the day, I thought it was so corny, and I haven't changed my opinion on that one a bit. This one was originally titled, when it was in the Swedish Melodifestivalen, Fyra Bugg och en Coca-Cola. And Bugg was this popular chewing gum back in the 1980s. So if we're going to translate it really roughly, it's 4 chewing gums and a Coca-Cola. But the thing is, with the EBU, they don't allow any product placement or political views being aired in any song, so they had to change it to the fantastic title of Boogaloo and Rock and Roll or something like that. So corny, and I won't say anything more about this one. I really didn't like it back then, don't like it now. That's it. They were sent to the Eurovision that year of 1987. They ended up in 14th place, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, I've written it down here. I had to glance over. 12th place. Yeah, like I said, we're just going down and down again. I don't know what happened. Well, in this case, I know. What did take home the win that year was this lovely song. Hold me now. That was, of course, the wonderful Johnny Logan with Hold Me Now. And this was his second entry into the Eurovision in the 1980s. He already won once before with What's Another Year, right? But yeah, this one was unprecedented. Someone winning the Eurovision for the second time with the same artist. So all credit to him. He was to win once more, or twice actually, I think, in the Eurovision. So he's a legend, and yeah, that's all I can say. What a legend, and what a wonderful song this was. So we now come to the year 1988, and what I will do here is to clump together 88 and 89, because at the time of 1988, my interest shifted. I was at an age where other things were more important than Melodifestivalen and Eurovision. I know, what a shame. But that's just the facts of it. And I started to listen more to other electronic music that was entering my life at this point. House music, acid house became a thing as well, of course, and then eventually techno. So I went down that rabbit hole for a couple of years, and I more or less abandoned what was Melodifestivalen and Eurovision. I picked that one up later in the 1990s, but that's a story for another day. So with that said, I just want to say, well, let's have a quick look, like a collage of what was happening in 88 and 89, because certainly I was aware at some level of what was going on in Melodifestivalen and certainly in the Eurovision as well during 88 and 89. So I do have some fond memories, but I decided to just do them like this.
Där kommer Ulrika Gudmundsson, Fredrik Möller och Paul Kvanta åkande, lika med gruppen All of a sudden. Om igen.
Min resa var mot solen, stadig ljus. Över mina öron sjunker mig bohem och Rigoletto.
1988 and 1989 all packed together there in a nice college. Some of my favorite songs from those years, and from both Melodifestivalen and Eurovision, of course. But like I said, that's basically where it fizzled out for me, so I won't really do a proper recap on those years because I wasn't really there 100%, so to speak, in my focus on Melodifestivalen and Eurovision. And then throughout the 1990s, I kept an eye and an ear, of course, on every year's entries, but I wasn't engaged at all, really. It wasn't until the early 2000s where I started actively watching it again, and a lot of things changed, especially with Melodifestivalen in Sweden. Like I said before, we take it really seriously. So today, for example, or this year, and previous years as well, we had different heats. So it already starts in February, where we sit down for one Saturday for Heat 1, where we're presented with 6 artists or bands that we can vote on. And the one that ends up in the first place and the second place automatically goes to the final. And then in the third place and fourth place, those go to a semi-final of a sorts. And that's how it goes for roughly 4 or 5 weeks. And then on the 6th week, for example, we have a semi-final where the top ones, the 2 top ones, go to the final. And then in the final, we'll vote again and we'll choose who we get to send to represent Sweden in that year's Eurovision. So it's a really lengthy, and it's more complicated than I made it out to be here. I tried to make it really simple because the rules have changed throughout the year. So we had a bit of a different rules this year, for example, and so forth and so on. But that's roughly how it goes in Sweden. We take it really, really serious. And I love every bit of it. That's what I love with Melodifestivalen and Eurovision, is just the way it's done, how we are presented with different artists in different genres, different styles, all of that. I just love that. And that's what's so good with the Eurovision as well. It should be all about the music, right? And the diversity. And there could be quirky ones that you can laugh at and laugh along with, who knows. It's all of that. It's just a wonderful mess, really. I love it so much. And that's where we come to this year's Eurovision 2024. And you might watch this after the fact. But I promised that I would mention some of my favorites for this year. I won't go into any controversy around Eurovision for this year because I haven't seen a Eurovision filled with so much controversy as this year. But we'll leave it there and just talk about the music, right? So one of my favorites this year is a UK entry with Ollie Alexander, and the song is Dizzy. The UK have sent really weird entries for, I was about to say for the last couple of years, but that's not really true. But for the longest time, let's say that. But then it all straightened out when they sent Sam, for example. And then last year, it was last year, right? Yeah, we had May Muller. And that is a song that I loved. I already talked about that one on my channel. I did a review as well on the album that was the follow-up to that one. But unfortunately, it didn't go very well for her. I think it was down to technical difficulties on the final night, and I'll stand by that because the song itself and May Muller is so much better than that final performance on that night last year. So I really hope that Ollie Alexander does things right this year. We don't have any technical difficulties so far. It looks good. It sounds good. I love this song. And actually this week they released it on a 7-inch. So I had to pick it up because it's one of my favorites, and I was surprised that they released it on a single, but I'm so grateful. Really nice packaging here, just to show it really quickly. There he is on a swing on both sides, and inside you actually get an insert with this 7-inch as well, so it's really nice. So you've got some credits here, and of course the lyrics to the song as well, and it's presented on red beautiful vinyl. So you got the normal 3-minute Eurovision version, and then on the other side you get the extended version. It's just slightly extended because the Eurovision rule states a song can't be over 3 minutes, so I think the extended one runs 4 minutes something, but it's really good. Got a lot of flack, as usual, here in the UK, because usually most of the entries for UK's Eurovision get a lot of flack, and unnecessarily so. We should support them all the way. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. I think it's missable, the lack of support the UK artists get for the Eurovision Song Contest. But let's move on. The next one I really love is Italy. Love this one. It's a really good standout track. And of course, Sweden. I thought that one was really good, and I'm biased because I'm originally from Sweden. I usually love Sweden's entries, but not all the time, as we've seen here from the 1980s. Yeah, so Marcus and Martinus representing Sweden this year with Unforgettable. Really good song, in my opinion. The last one I want to mention as one of my favorites for this year's Eurovision is Spain, and it's the group Nebulosa, and I'm sorry for any Spanish viewers out there. I'm gonna do my best. The title of the song is Thora, or Zora, something like that. Anyhow, it's such a great song. I fell in love with it straight away the first time I've heard it, and I haven't stopped listening to it ever since. It's such a good one. So fingers crossed for Spain this year. Love it. This one, of course, got the influences from 80s pop disco. It's just brilliant, and I love it. One of the many things that I love with Eurovision, and those are my favorites from this year's Eurovision for sure. What are your favorites for this year, for example? Put them down in the comments, and perhaps you are watching this after the fact, so we already know who won, but that doesn't matter. What were your favorites? And most importantly, if we look back historically, what were your favorites? Were there any favorites among the things we talked about today, or I talked about today, that is? Or did you have a favorite from the 1990s, where myself were absent more or less from the Eurovision? Or is there any other era where you have a favorite from? Put it down in the comments. Let's get that discussion going. That would be really great. I want to thank you all for watching another episode with me, and thank you so much to all of you who subscribe to my channel. And if you really like this, consider subscribing, or give it a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you don't like it. Just after your honest opinion here. But until next time, you all take care of yourself, and adieu.